This is the brand new Vitus Vitesse Evo. It's a flagship race bike from a brand that's well known for offering lots of value. Vitus used to be famous for its lugged and bonded aluminium frames, which are raced by some really famous pros back in the day. In more recent years, it's been the house brand of Chain Reaction Cycles, the massive bike shop. By the way, if you're particularly taken with the clothing that I'm wearing right now, this is courtesy of our kit sponsors, Freewheel. Look for the link in the description. Thanks very much, guys. Right now, it's a little bit chilly to be standing around in just cycling kit talking, so I'm going to put a jacket on. The Vitesse is a weight-focused race bike with disc brakes, as you can see. It's a total update on its predecessor. You can see it's quite a different shape. It's lighter, it's stiffer, it's got more tyre clearance, it's just generally better in every way. Vitus says this frame weighs 910 grams with paint, and it's matched to a fork that weighs 370 grams. That 910 gram frame weight, incidentally, is fairly competitive when you think about how much this bike costs, which we'll get to in a bit. It puts it in the very similar ballpark to the second tier Fact 10R Tarmac SL7. Vitus has achieved that apparently using what they call a one-piece monocoque construction. It's quite common for frames to be made of sub-assemblies where 2 or 3 parts are plugged together and joined, but in this case they say it's all one part, the frame. With the latest bikes, we're used to seeing a convergence between aero stuff and lightweight stuff. It's no surprise to see that the Vitesse has aero-shaped tubing. Now, Vitus doesn't make any specific claims about the aerodynamic properties of this bike, but it's got truncated aerofoils like you see on pretty well every other race bike on the market. One thing they did say is that they reckon this bike is slightly faster than the current ZX1 aero bike, which is something. Stiffness was a big focus of Vitus's redesign of this bike. They reckon that across all areas, so that's bottom bracket, head tube and everything, it averages to an increase of 35%, which sounds like a lot. They've also focused on the fork because apparently the previous model suffered from a little bit of disc rub, so this one is redesigned slightly to avoid that. As you'd expect on a 2021 bike, it's got 12mm through axles at both ends and flat mount disc brakes. That's more or less a given now. It's also no surprise to see dropped seat stays, which are a bike designer's favourite way of adding rear end compliance and lateral stiffness. It's easier to make a small triangle stiffer than a big one, and in some cases it can also offer an aerodynamic benefit, although, as I say, no specific claims here. A lot of the high-end bikes that have come out in the last year or so have featured really high levels of integration, and Vitus hasn't gone as far on that front. The cables are on show, but they all enter on the non-drive side of the bike rather than crisscrossing in front of the head tube. Apparently, this was a conscious decision by Vitus because to go with more integration would have meant having to use a bigger headset bearing, which comes with a weight penalty because then you have a bigger steerer as well. Obviously, different bike designers have different attitudes to this sort of thing. Does mean you don't get as clean a front end as the likes of the new Tarmac SL7 or BMC's Team Machine, but there you go. Like many disc race bikes, this has pretty good tyre clearance compared to the race bikes of old. According to Vitus, this will take a 30mm tyre on any rim, and you can go bigger on some rims. Obviously, wider rims tend to bulk out the tyre slightly more. There are no particularly odd standards here either. The bottom bracket is BB386 Evo, which has very broad crank compatibility, and for example, that seat post is just a normal round one. Crazy. Incidentally, a detail that I really like is the seat clamp, which is the typical flush fit aero design, but the bolt faces forward at an angle, which means you can actually get a standard multi-tool on it. It's a tiny detail, but when you're making small adjustments, it just makes life so much easier. On the geometry front, this is classic race bike stuff. This size medium bike has 547mm of stack and 387mm of reach, and the wheelbase is 991mm, which is on the shorter end for that kind of chuckable, racy feel. Vitus considers this bike unisex. Incidentally, they don't differentiate between male and female when it comes to fit or components particularly. I think a special mention should go to the paint on this bike. Now, you don't get a lovely sparkly metallic paint job like we saw on the Vitus Energy cross bike, which also just launched. What you do get is this very millennial shade of grey, which I'm sure you will agree pairs well with mustard yellow soft furnishings and very strong opinions about pour over coffees. So let's talk about this build, which is the Vitesse Evo CRS Di2, which is in the middle of the range. I'll give you full details of the range later on in the video, but this particular model costs £3,700 minus a penny. That gets you a full Shimano Ultegra Di2 group set, except for the chain and the cassette. Chain's KMC, the cassette is a Sunrace item, which won't come as much of a surprise because Chain Reaction Cycles sells Sunrace kit. I'm sure some of you would prefer a group set matching cassette. On the other hand, this one has red anodized bits, so there is that. Vitus has been reasonably generous with the gearing, even though this is a race bike. So you get the semi-compact 52/36 crank, but an 11/32 cassette. So you get a pretty low gear all the same. I won't bore on about Ultegra Di2. It's one of our favorite group sets. We've talked about it a lot. It's consistently very, very good. Shifting is excellent, braking is excellent, so we have absolutely no complaints there. The wheels are Reynolds AR29 DB carbon clinchers, which are a real all-rounder choice. They've got a super blunt rim section and they're 21mm internal, which means that they play nice with larger tyres. In this case, Vitus has fitted 25mm tyres, so not super wide, but they are tubeless. Vitus was kind enough to set my bike up tubeless for me, so that's how I'm running it. If you actually buy one of these bikes, you will have to do that part yourself, but it should be straightforward because it's all ready for you. The tyres are Schwalbe 1 tubeless, which is the second tier kind of performance all-rounder tyre. I think maybe I'd like to have seen the Pro one, but this is a perfectly good tyre, no complaints. As you'd expect, the finishing kit is from the Wiggle Chain Reaction Cycles stable as well. Wiggle and CRC are joined, in case you didn't know that. That means you get prime carbon bars, carbon seat post, a nice aluminium stem, and the saddle is a Vitus branded item with titanium rails. This complete build for a size medium without pedals is 7.6 kilograms, which is not half bad. The previous generation Vitesse was a pretty firm, focused race bike, and it's fair to say that the new model continues very much in that vein. Vitus doesn't make any particular claims about squishy, shock-absorbing technology or large amounts of compliance, and this is quite a direct ride. Of course, the fact that it has 25mm tyres is a factor as well. A lot of the road bikes that are coming in for testing these days have 28s or even bigger, and of course you could run them on this bike because the clearances are there, but with 25mm tyres you can certainly feel the road surface. Vitus specifically mentioned having engineered out disc rub at the fork, and I can confirm I have not experienced any while riding this, and it's a problem that afflicts a huge number of bikes, including some quite high-end ones. It's not really a big deal when it does happen, but it's very annoying when you're climbing out of the saddle and you just get that little snick, snick, snick noise as the rotor kisses the pad. While this bike isn't record-breakingly light or anything, it is pretty good for its class, and it really feels light, if that makes sense. There's no sense of wasted energy when you're climbing, and it's one of those bikes that when you are kind of throwing it around has a pleasant kind of weightless feel to it, if you want to say that. I think these Reynolds wheels are an interesting choice. A lot of bikes in this category get spec'd with reasonably deep section aero wheels. Vitus has gone with something that's much more of an all-rounder. They're really quite a shallow section. But what I like about them is that they handle really, really well in gusty conditions. I was riding in the tail end of Storm Francis yesterday when it was literally 50-mile-an-hour winds. And I'm quite a light rider and tend to get blown around, but these were astonishingly good and really felt quite safe. So personally, I really rate these as a choice, but I'm sure some of you would prefer a 60mm aero wheel instead. All in all, the Vitesse's ride quality and general riding experience is that of a race bike. If that's what you're looking for, if you want that firm, always on racy personality, I think you'll love this bike. It's super stiff, responsive, climbs really well, it's chuckable. There's nothing really to fault about it in that respect. On the other hand, if you're looking for something really super comfortable that's going to cosset you in your day-to-day riding, or which you might dabble in a bit of gravel with, I probably wouldn't choose this bike because that's just not its personality. From a rider's perspective, if you are shopping for this as a race bike, it is quite nice to know that there will be actual pro cyclists riding this frame set, and that's true even if you're buying the very bottom of the range bike. Now, let me talk you through the whole Vitus Vitesse range, and in time-honoured tradition, because there are too many facts and figures, I'm going to need to refer to my notes for this. The cheapest Vitesse Evo, the CR, with 105 and aluminium clinchers, comes in at a penny under £2,000. Next up, the Evo CRS Ultegra comes with a mechanical Ultegra group set and the same Reynolds carbon wheels that this bike has, and that's a penny under £3,000. Then comes this model, the CRS Di2, so that's Ultegra Di2, Reynolds carbon wheels, that's £3,699. Above that, the Evo CRS E-Tap gets SRAM's Force E-Tap Axis group set, and again, same wheels, and that's 150 quid more at 3,749. Finally, the top spec Evo CRX gets SRAM Red E-Tap Axis, same Reynolds wheels, and is 4,799. Compared to the rest of the market, Vitus is fairly generous on specs. For a bit of context, a 2021 Giant TCR Advanced Pro 1, also with discs, is £3,699. That's with a mechanical Ultegra group set and carbon wheels. So Vitus is pretty competitive around that level. So there you have it, the 2021 Vitus Vitesse Evo. It's a capable race bike. It's a very affordable pro bike if you want to see it that way. Possibly too focused for more casual riders, but those of you who want to go fast all the time are going to appreciate it, and it's respectably light and well spec'd for the money. How do you feel about Vitus's efforts? Do you like the shade of grey? Does the spec work for you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that little bell icon so you get notified about all of our new videos.